My family stole my $120K inheritance for my sister, but when I sued them as a minor, justice broke them, and now they're begging for forgiveness. I'm 17 years old. I'm in my senior year of high school, and what my parents did to me basically forced me to sue them to recover the money my grandparents left specifically for my college education. Yes, you read that right. I had to take my own parents to legal mediation because they decided my older sister deserved it more than me. I guess I should start from the beginning, so this makes sense. Because when I tell it like this, it sounds completely unreal. But I swear all of this actually happened. My paternal grandparents passed away when I was like 15. I think. It was super painful because we were very close, especially my grandmother and me. She always said I was going to do great things, that I was going to go to an amazing university, and that nothing was going to stop me, you know? She was one of those grandmothers who makes you feel like you can conquer the world. When they died, they left a very specific will, where they established there was a fund of $120,000, destined exclusively for my college education. They left it in writing, with a lawyer, everything legal and official. The executor of the will was a family friend who worked as a lawyer, and my parents were put in charge of managing that money until I went to college. My sister Rachel is 25 years old. So, we're 8 years apart, and she's always been the golden child of the family. It's not that I hate her or anything, but it's the reality. My parents literally adore her. She's a kindergarten teacher, super sweet with everyone, does everything right according to them, never gets in trouble, you know the type. I, on the other hand, was always more independent, more argumentative, more about questioning rules that didn't make sense, and my parents never liked that. For as long as I can remember, the comparison was constant. Rachel this, Rachel that. Why can't you be more like your sister? That kind of thing that slowly wears you down. When my grandparents died 2 years ago, my parents acted all sad and devastated. They did the funeral, the whole thing, and I never thought there would be any problem with the money because the will was super clear. My grandparents specifically put that money for me, for my education, not for the family in general or for whatever my parents wanted, but so I could go to college without worrying about student debt. It was their way of making sure I had the opportunities they didn't have. You know what I mean? Everything was relatively normal for like a year and a half after that. I continued in school, getting good grades because I knew that money was waiting for me, and I wanted to make the most of it by going to a good university. I started the college application process this year, and that's when everything fell apart in the most absurd way possible. It was like last October. I was at the kitchen table reviewing college applications and talking with my mom about costs and all that. You know, trying to calculate which universities were viable. So I casually asked her, "Hey Mom, when are we going to talk about how the fund my grandparents left works? Because I need to know how much I have available to do my applications and decide where I'm going." And she went quiet for a moment, like uncomfortable, and then said, "Oh yeah, about that, we need to talk." My dad was there too, and they both looked at each other with that look that you already know means trouble. My mom sighed and said, "Look, honey, the thing is that money is no longer available." I was like, "What do you mean it's not available? It's my money for college. It's in the will." And that's when they dropped the bomb in the most casual way in the world, like they were talking about the weather. Turns out my sister Rachel has been dating her boyfriend Daniel for like 3 years. He works at a zoo or something, and last year they decided they wanted to buy a house together. The problem was they didn't have enough money for the down payment, like they needed, about $100,000 to be able to buy the house they wanted in a decent neighborhood. And my parents, in their infinite wisdom, decided the best solution was to use my college fund to buy my sister a house. Yes, you read that right. They used $120,000 that my grandparents left specifically for my education to buy the golden child a house. When they told me just like that, as if it was the most normal thing in the world, I literally was speechless. I couldn't process what I was hearing. I told them, "You're joking, right? This is a joke." And my dad had the nerve to say, "It's not a joke, Emily. Your sister needed help and we were in a position to give it to her." I said, "But that was my money. Grandpa and Grandma left it for me. It was in the will. You can't just use it for something else." And that's where it got worse because my mom said, "Well, technically, the money was under our administration, and we decided it was a better investment to help your sister get established. You're young, you can take out student loans, get scholarships, work. There are many options. Rachel needed that help now." I sat there processing that they had basically just admitted they stole my inheritance to give it to my sister because she's more important. I told them that was illegal, that the will specified the money was for my education and they couldn't just ignore it. My dad laughed, like he actually laughed in my face, and said, "And what are you going to do, Emily? Sue us. You can't even afford a lawyer." My mom added something about how when I was older, I would understand they made the right decision for the family, that Rachel needed stability and that I was smart enough to get my own way to pay for college. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe my own parents had done this, and on top of that acted like I was the irrational one for being angry. I yelled at them. I told them they were thieves, that they had stolen my future to give it to their favorite daughter, and my dad got all serious and told me not to dare speak to them like that. That as long as I lived under their roof, I was going to respect their decisions. It was at that moment I knew I had to get out of there, because if I stayed, I was going to explode. That same night, I packed a backpack with clothes and essential things and went to my best friend's house. Her parents are incredible. When I told them what had happened, they were horrified and told me I could stay as long as I needed. My mom sent me like 50 messages that night saying I was being dramatic, to come back home so we could talk like adults. But I blocked her because I had nothing to talk about with people who had stolen $120,000 from me. I spent like 3 days at my friend's house trying to think what to do. I had no money. I was still in high school, and my parents were right that I couldn't afford a lawyer. But then I remembered my uncle Marcus, who technically is my dad's cousin, but I always call him uncle, had always been cool with me. He lives in another state and I don't see him often, but he was always one of those who supported me and asked me how school was going and stuff like that. I decided to take a chance and sent him a message on Facebook, explaining the whole situation. Marcus responded like 2 hours later and was furious. Like really angry. He told me what my parents had done was completely illegal, that the will was a legally binding document and they had no right to use that money for anything other than my education. He asked me if I had a copy of the will or the executor's name, and luckily I remembered the name of my grandparents' lawyer friend. Marcus told me he was going to take care of everything, not to worry, and that he was going to contact the executor of the will immediately. Turns out Marcus is an accountant, but has many contacts in the legal world, and when he contacted the executor of the will and told him what had happened, the guy turned white according to what Marcus told me later. The executor had no idea my parents had used the money for something else. Apparently my parents had told him the money was still in a savings account waiting for me to go to college. Basically, they had lied to the executor of the will, which is super illegal. The executor immediately initiated the legal process to recover the money. Marcus explained to me that since the will was very specific about the use of the money, my parents had committed something called misappropriation of trust funds or something like that. I don't remember the exact term, but basically that yes, they had stolen my inheritance and could get into serious legal trouble. Marcus even offered to pay a lawyer's fees if necessary, but the executor said he could handle the case because it was part of his responsibilities to ensure the will was fulfilled. When my parents found out I had initiated legal action, things got intense. They started sending me messages every 2-10 day. First angry, saying, "How dare I drag the family through the mud?" That I was being ungrateful. That after everything they had done for me, this is how I repaid them. Then the messages changed to emotional manipulation attempts, like "Your sister is devastated. How can you do this to the family? Grandma and Grandpa wouldn't have wanted us to fight like this." I ignored all the messages because you know what? They started this when they decided to rob me. Marcus also helped me find a small apartment I could afford with the part-time job I got at a coffee shop. My roommate is named Sophie. She's a college student and needed someone to share the rent, so it worked out perfect. Marcus even helped me with the deposit and the first month's rent, telling me I could pay him back when I recovered my money, but that the important thing was I had a safe place to stay away from my parents. The legal process was longer than I expected. The first mediation session was in December. I think 2 months after everything exploded. It was super awkward because it was the first time I saw my parents since I left the house. They were there with their own lawyer. I was with the executor of the will and Marcus, and there was a professional mediator trying to resolve everything without having to go to court. My parents tried all kinds of absurd arguments. They said they had used the money with good intentions, that they thought helping Rachel buy a house was a better investment than sending it to college, that I was smart enough to get scholarships and that Rachel needed more help. The executor basically said none of that mattered because the will was clear. The money was for my college education period, There was no room for interpretation or decisions based on personal opinions. I told them directly, looking them in the eyes, that I wanted the $120,000 back immediately, that I didn't care how they got it, but that was my money, and I needed it for college. My dad had the nerve to say they couldn't just take the house away from Rachel, that she and Daniel had already made improvements and it would be unfair. Like, seriously? And stealing $120,000 from me wasn't unfair? That first mediation didn't resolve anything. It basically ended with the mediator telling my parents they had limited options, that the law was clear, and they were going to have to return the money one way or another. They could do it voluntarily through mediation, or we could go to court and they were going to lose anyway, but with much higher legal fees and possible criminal charges for misappropriation. After that session, Rachel contacted me for the first time. She sent me a long message apologizing, saying she didn't know the money had come from my college fund, that my parents had told her it was a gift from them, that she never would have accepted the help if she had known the truth. Honestly, I don't know whether to completely believe her. Like, did she really never ask where $100,000 came from just like that out of nowhere? But at the same time, I know Rachel, and I know my parents are completely capable of lying to her too. We had like 3 or 4 more mediation sessions over the following months. Each time my parents were more desperate, offering to pay me back in monthly installments over like 20 years, which was ridiculous because I needed the money now for college, not in 2 decades. The executor was super clear. Either return the full money or we go to court and then they're going to have to sell Rachel's house plus pay legal fees and possibly face criminal charges. In one of the last mediation sessions, my mom started crying, saying, "How could I be destroying the family over money? That blood was more important than anything." And I told her, "You destroyed this family when you stole my future to give it to your favorite daughter? I'm just trying to recover what is legally mine." My dad kept insisting they couldn't take the house away from Rachel, that she had an established life there, and I basically told him that wasn't my problem, that they should have thought about the consequences before stealing my inheritance. Eventually, the executor and my parents' lawyer started preparing everything to go to formal court. Papers were filed, there were established dates, the whole thing was getting more serious. My parents finally understood they were going to lose in court and probably face even worse consequences, so they asked for one last mediation session. In that final session, which was like in March of this year, my parents arrived with a plan. Basically, they were going to refinance their own house, take out a large loan, and combine that with some savings to return the full $120,000 to me. They didn't want to sell Rachel's house, but they accepted they had no other option if they didn't want to go to court. The agreement was they would transfer the full money to a trust account supervised by the executor to ensure it would only be used for my education, and in return, I wouldn't press additional criminal charges. We all signed the papers in April. It was super surreal to be sitting there watching my parents sign legal documents promising to return money they should never have touched in the first place. They didn't say a word during the entire signing. They just looked defeated and bitter. After signing, my mom tried to approach me to talk, but I just left with Marcus without saying anything because honestly, I had nothing to say to them. The money was completely transferred at the end of April. Marcus and the executor verified everything was there, the full $120,000 in the trust account that can only be used for educational expenses. I can't explain the relief I felt when I saw that money finally where it was supposed to be. It had been like 6 months since all this started. 6 months of horrible stress, of living away from what was supposed to be my family, of fighting for something that was always mine. The crazy thing is, I also got news from universities, like 2 weeks after everything was resolved. I applied to several good schools, and my first choice accepted me with a full merit scholarship. Turns out I didn't even need all the fund money for tuition because my grades were good enough for a full scholarship, but I still have the money there for housing, books, food, everything else. So I'm going to be able to concentrate completely on studying without having to work full-time or take out loans that will chase me for decades. Rachel and I talked like once, since everything was resolved. She basically told me she understood why I did what I did, that she was angry with our parents for putting her in that position without telling her the truth. I don't know if our relationship will fully recover. Honestly, I don't know if I want it to. But at least she acknowledged our parents were wrong. She doesn't have to return the house, because my parents got the money another way, so she and Daniel are still living there. But now she knows the truth about where the down payment originally came from. My parents, on the other hand, are completely out of my life. I haven't spoken to them since the signing of the papers in April, and I don't plan to anytime soon. They keep sending me messages occasionally, like every 2 or 3 weeks, telling me they want to fix things, that family is important, that they're willing to forgive me for all the legal drama. Like, them forgive me? The audacity is impressive. I have them blocked on everything except email, because the executor of the will said it's good to keep at least one communication channel open just in case, but I don't read their messages. Marcus has basically become my real family. He helped me with the entire moving process to the college dorm for next semester. He gives me advice about classes and career, like he's the father my own parents never were. He says he's proud of me for fighting for what was mine, that it takes guts to sue your own parents while being a minor, and that my grandparents would be proud to see me defend their will. Sophie, my roommate, has also been incredible. She was the one who went with me to the final signing because Marcus couldn't make it on time that day. She waited outside for me, and then we went to eat, celebrating that everything was finally over. She told me what I did was inspiring, that she never would have had the courage to confront her family like that even if they were wrong. And that made me feel a little less like the villain of the story my parents tried to make me seem. Now, I'm about to start my first year of college. I have my full fund for education like my grandparents wanted, a place of my own to live, an uncle who really supports me, and no contact with the parents who thought it was okay to rob me. Is it the perfect family situation? Not at all. Does it hurt that my own parents valued me so little they literally stole my future? Absolutely. Do I regret suing them? Not for a second. People ask me sometimes if I'm ever going to forgive them or if I'm going to reconcile with them. And honestly, I don't know. I can't imagine having a normal relationship with people who stole $120,000 from me and then acted like I was the bad one for wanting to recover it. Maybe when I'm older and have more perspective, things will change, but right now I'm okay with not having them in my life. I have Marcus, I have Sophie, I have friends who supported me through all this, and I have my educational future secured, which is what my grandparents wanted. The craziest thing about all this is my parents had so many opportunities to do the right thing. They could have not stolen the money in the first place. They could have admitted their mistake when I confronted them. They could have returned the money voluntarily before I initiated legal action, but at every step they chose to protect Rachel and minimize what they had done to me. And now they have to live with the consequences of those decisions, just like I have to live knowing my own parents robbed me. I start classes in 2 weeks and I'm nervous but also excited. I'm going to study what I want at an incredible university without the burden of massive student debt, which is exactly what my grandparents envisioned when they left that money. Sometimes I think about them and how they would feel knowing I had to fight so hard for their will to be respected, and I think they'd be proud I didn't give up, that I defended what was right even though it was difficult. At the end of the day, I guess this experience taught me that sometimes biological family isn't your real family. Your real family are the people who support you, who fight for you, who respect your rights and your future. For me, that person is Marcus, not the parents who shared my DNA but not my value as a person. And with that, I can live.